I was just reading the following verse, and then I am going to share again what some of you have heard, but I can't help but share this again right now after I was reading Matthew 10:27. What I tell you in the darkness, speak in the light. And what you hear whispered in your ear, proclaim upon the housetop. As I've said before, and some of you have heard this before, but others haven't. And after reading that again just a few minutes ago, I have to come and make a message again concerning the open vision my wife and I had. We were in our room. We had an apartment at that time, and we were in the apartment, and the Lord had been speaking to me, and I knew it was Him, speaking to me through the Word so clearly, but also speaking to me. And I told my wife, I have to know if it's Him. I mean, it's so clear. And I was laying on the couch, and she was sitting in a chair on the other side of the living room. And I said, Rose, I have to know if it's Him. I just have to know. And I was laying there on the couch, and she was staring at me. And all of a sudden, I could hear Him so clearly. I could hear it as another person speaking to me. And He said, John. And I said, Rose, He said John. I know He said John. I know He said His sheep hear His voice, but I heard Him say John. And then He said again, John, not only have I forgiven you. And I said, Rose, He said, John, not only have I forgiven you. And then I paused. And then I could hear Him say again, but John, I made a way for you to be forgiven. And I said to my wife, Rose, He said also that He made a way for me to be forgiven. And I'm sitting there just in amazement that I could hear it so clearly. And then He said, and John, not only did I make a way for you to be forgiven. And I said to my wife, Rose, and He said, not only did He make a way for me to be forgiven. And then I'm sitting there again just in amazement, and He goes, but John, I am the way that was made for you to be forgiven. And I looked back at my wife and I said, Rose, I can't believe it. That is so scriptural. That is so perfect Bible. That is so good. I know it's Him who said it, but everybody's saying you can't say you actually hear His voice. You just read the Bible for information. But I said, Rose, that's what He said. And I'm laying there on the couch and I look back at her, and all of a sudden she's got a very weird, scared look on her face, and she starts crying. And I said, Rose, what's the matter? Are you okay? What's the matter? And this was late at night. And as he said here, what you hear in the darkness, this was late at night. Speak in the light. And I said, Rose, no, I heard it. I really heard it. And that's really good Bible there. And she got up and ran out the front door. And I went running after her. And she went down an alley, and hey, Rose, you shouldn't be out here late at night. Come on, let's go back in the house. And she's behind this garage crying and crying and crying. I said, Rose, what's the matter? And she just kept crying. And I says, come on, I'm going to help you back to the house. And we get back into the apartment, and we're sitting on the couch, and I says, what's the matter? And she's just crying. And I said, what happened? Tell me. And she says, John, I got to tell you, you were laying on the couch, and you said, Rose, He just said John. But just before you said that, He walked through the wall. He walked right through the wall beside the door, and He went over to you, and He cupped His hand over your ear. And he said, John. But I couldn't hear him. You said to me, he said John. That's how I knew he said John. Because he would cup his hand over your ear. He would whisper in your ear. And I couldn't hear him speaking, but I could hear you telling me what he said. And he said John. And you said to me, Rose, he said John. And it went through that whole thing that you had told me, word for word. And she said, and when he walked into the room, at first I wanted to freak out, but a peace come over me, a peace come over the whole room. And every time he put over his hand over your ears, you would tell me what he said. And he would look at me, waiting for you to tell me. And he would whisper, and you'd say, Rose, he said John. And then he'd go back and put his hands over your ear, and he'd say, John, I have forgiven you. And then he'd look at me, my wife is telling me this, he'd look at me, and you would say to me, he said, John, I have forgiven you. And this went on through that entire thing. And she said, I said, really, what did he look like? And she goes, just like a regular man, walked through the wall. But he went through the wall. The door was right there, but he went through the wall, and he looked like a regular man. But he didn't look anything about like these statues and pictures. He was very Middle Eastern looking, and his beard was pulled out, and he had holes around his forehead where the thorns were in. And his hands, John, there's something I don't understand though. The holes weren't up in the palms of his hands where all the pictures and everything have it. They were at the back of his hand. And neither one of us knew at that time. We thought, when you see all the pictures, the nails were up here. But as I was sharing this story, other Christians who knew more than we did at that time said no. They used to put the nails back here so the hands didn't rip out. We didn't know that. She didn't know that. But as I was reading this here today, I just felt like I had to share this message again. And at times I'm going to share it over and over because it has to be out there. And this is what he said in Matthew 10:27. What I tell you in the darkness, it was dark that night, speak in the light. And what you heard whispered in your ear, he was whispering in my ear. Proclaim upon the housetop. So I'm going to share this right now today. He brought this to me. He quickened this. And I'm going to share it again. And I hope those who haven't heard it get to hear it. If you want more detail and more on this vision in my playlist, I've got messages on this. There's more to it. But for right now, I just want to do what it said here. What he says here, what I tell you in the darkness, speak in the light. And what you hear whispered in your ear, proclaim upon the housetops. So what we're proclaiming is that he's coming. And we're to repent and prepare the way of the Lord. I'm telling you, saints, you don't understand. We're not to love the world or the things of the world. Every Christian wants to think about it, oh, I don't do just evil, darkness, I don't murder, I don't rape, I don't do this and that. It's not what it said. We're not to love the world and the things of the world. And we're to repent and prepare the way of the Lord.